the US, for all intents and purposes, should have felt like home, and for whatever deep intuitive reason, never did. And not because I felt like an outsider, not because I felt like I didn't have a good trajectory and opportunities, but there was something deeper than that. And Bulgaria was nowhere on my horizon. It didn't make any sense. And I really never dreamed or imagined that I would come back to Bulgaria.
Wow.
So in terms of a pivot, I did not intend to come to Bulgaria.
Had you visited Bulgaria in that time?
Oh, in that overall time, my family had been back about a total of 5 times.
Wow.
This is the Back to Bulgaria podcast. Discover life in Bulgaria, one story at a time.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Back to Bulgaria, the podcast that will help you gain a perspective of what it's like to live and thrive in Bulgaria. I'm your host, Anna Maria Andrieva, and I am a crazy American-born Bulgarian who has lived in a few different places in my life, but now I've decided to make Sofia my home. Together with my sister, who is just as crazy, we have started this podcast to showcase the stories of people who have either moved back to Bulgaria or decided to actively stay here and have done some pretty awesome things in this country. We'll discuss a large variety of topics from the basics of living in Bulgaria to building a business here, building a career, and of course, building relationships here. We discuss topics that matter to people who are interested in making a real impact in Bulgaria and creating change in this country. Today, I am here with Antonia Dimitrova. I'm so excited that you're here, Antonia.
I'm very excited too. Thank you for the invitation, minus all the technological things around us.
Yes, we're just here having a casual conversation. And I was actually thinking back to when we first met. I think it was about like a year and a half ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I just remember being so inspired by you.
Wow.
I don't know. It was like the beginning of when I had moved to Bulgaria, and you were the first person I think that I had met that had also moved back from the States, and like had decided to start a life here. And I just want to like just go a little bit more into your story before we go ahead and start. You were actually born in Bulgaria, and your family moved to Miami when you were 6 years old. Right?
Yeah. Yes, in 92.
Yeah. So since then, you studied there. You actually started getting into art and ended up having a degree in art history and fine art with concentration in printmaking, which is pretty cool. And then you were an interior design firm for 11 years before
full-time 11 years.
Yeah.
Still working and dabbling in it overseas from here remotely. It's a little more challenging, but yes.
Yeah. And then eventually in 2018, you actually started your journey back to Bulgaria. Now you're involved in all types of like various organizations that are helping actually make an impact in Bulgaria, and which we can visually see in cities all over Bulgaria, which is so amazing. But before we dive too deeply into that, let's start from where it all started for you. Can you share with us just more about what you were doing before you moved to Bulgaria, how your life looked like?
Sure. My life in the States was actually quite comfortable, having grown up there since I was little, although my family went through a number of ups and downs, and I've known what it is to have a lot and to have a little. At the time when I decided to leave my position at the interior design firm, I was actually had a direction, a very clear direction. I could have easily established my own company if I really wanted to pursue interior design. I was considering pursuing a master's. I had always intended to do a master's, but then literally started working right after college. I was offered this position. I thought I would be there for 1 or 2 years. So the firm is a very small interior design firm with a woman who recently passed away graduate just last year.
Mhm.
But she had over 35 years of experience and worked internationally, although a lot of our clients were seasonal. And so, although they had homes in Miami, they also had homes around the US and some around the world.
Yeah.
So, being that it was a small firm, I had the opportunity to really become familiar with the entire scope of work,
Yeah.
from conceptual design, which was one of the entry points where I would gather concepts, preparing presentations for clients, working with vendors, making the actual, being present during client meetings, to actual project management and implementing a construction project for residential, really luxury high-end residential projects.
Yeah.
So my life pretty much, once I started working in design, was that not 9 to 5, but 7 to 8, probably 7 a.m. to 8. For a large period of time, I commuted over an hour and a half to and from work. Miami, for any of you who
Oh my
know, is
gosh.
a very widespread city. It's not a walkable city by any means. And although without traffic, it might take me 20 minutes to get to work, on any given day, it could easily be between an hour and an hour and a half in
So
each direction.
you were
Yeah.
spending probably like 14 to 15 hours doing stuff around work, trying to get to work, trying to being
Sure.
there, coming back.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then the actual, our actual time in the office. Anyone who's worked, anywhere remotely, I'm sure most people can relate. It's a very different pace. It's
Yeah.
a different lifestyle. Even for my family, I think some of my family in some ways knew a little bit of what was involved in my day to day, and then not necessarily a full sense.
Mhm.
So although I very much value the work, I also very much value the firm that I worked with.
Yeah.
Uh, it. I always believed that art does actually have a capacity to change people's lives in a very relational and community way, beyond the sentiment of just good publicity or theory. And so I really had a longing for years, and I had a longing to apply that and to
Mhm.
see that actually play out in reality.
Yeah.
I really didn't know where to start. So even while I was working, 2015, I started for a certification for expressive arts, which looks at the creative process and how the creative process can be used as a methodology. Many people are familiar nowadays with the process of design thinking.
Mhm.
Design thinking might be one very systematic example of some shared principles with the wider theory of expressive arts. And that led to a master's that I worked on remotely. And so at 2018, I decided that I just really needed to shift gears.
Yeah. This must have been like a huge jump for you, because it sounds like you were kind of in your zone, from what I hear, like being able to work for a firm which had so much experience, being able to like grow in that and maybe probably see the impact that you were having. What then, like from going from all of that in the States, what led you to even consider or think about moving back to Bulgaria
Sure.
after so many years?
Well, to be quite blunt, Bulgaria was nowhere on my horizon. If you do the math, 92 to 2018. I mean, I was not born in the US, but I very much felt comfortable in the culture, the society, and the economy.
Yeah.
I never really quite felt at home in the US, and I never felt at home in Bulgaria.
Yeah, I think this is
Yeah.
something that we might share. Like when you're from two different cultures, you're just kind of like, both places can work, both places don't exactly work.
Yeah. So I guess the point I would drive home is that the US, for all intents and purposes, should have felt like home. And for whatever deep intuitive reason, never did. And not because I felt like an outsider, not because I felt like I didn't have a good trajectory and opportunities. But there was something deeper than that. And Bulgaria was nowhere on my horizon. It didn't make any sense. And I really never dreamed or imagined that I would come back to Bulgaria.
Wow. Yeah.
So in terms of a pivot, I did not intend to come to Bulgaria.
Had you visited Bulgaria in that time?
Oh, in that overall time, my family had been back about a total of 5 times,
Wow.
with about a 10-year span between the time that we left and came back. And then it started getting ever closer and ever closer. So it was 10, and then 3 years later, and then 2 years apart, and then 1 year.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
But still, 5 years and, almost 30-year span is not very often.
Yeah.
So,
what happened there?
Yeah. Well, what happened was my belief in the power of art and what I wanted to invest my life in. And if I were to, I guess, run to the end of the podcast, I would say my big takeaway is my drive home takeaway point would be that my work here, I could do what I'm doing here anywhere, but I see the impact that it can have here to be so much bigger. So at the core, what I wanted to do is work with people and art and seeing how art and community can actually be transformed.
Mm-hmm.
And regardless of without having Bulgaria on my horizon, I wanted to be investing my time in that direction.
Yeah.
So
that was your focus.
Yes. So at one point, after going through the expressive arts certification and training and the master's program, I felt I needed to go into a different direction, but I really didn't know how and where and when. I kept wanting to have clarity about that next step, and that clarity just wasn't coming. And so I took a leap of faith, and I said, I'm just going to leave. And my decision was then I would take a sabbatical. I intended to take a sabbatical, and I looked for an artist residency. So I felt that I would search for that next step by way of the art and giving myself some space to think and be present and repossession, look to a different direction.
Find some clarity.
Yeah. And so I actually intended to find a residency either in the US, there's some very well-known residencies and very established and reputable, or Italy, being that I had a focus on printmaking.
Yeah.
So I was really looking in those directions, and completely incidentally came across an artist residency in Sofia, based out of Sofia, Bulgaria, which was large, not necessarily limited to non-Bulgarian artists, but largely attracted non-Bulgarian artists. And the moment I saw that, which prior to that Bulgaria was nowhere on my radar, the moment I saw that, I thought, oh, maybe this is a really great next step for me to do this sabbatical. I've made the decision to leave. I know that I want to shift direction, and this could be a defined frame for a time and space for me to be present, look for the next step, while being able to be present in Bulgaria for a given time. So I really just came with open eyes, open ears, just to see what's present.
Yeah. So you really just came
for a particular time, 3 months.
Yeah. So what exactly then happened in those 3 months? Because it's one thing to make a decision to take a sabbatical. It's another thing to then decide, oh, this place can work. What made you eventually have that realization that you could actually live in Bulgaria?
So once I came to Bulgaria for the period of time of the residency, I certainly had no plans to move here. But eyes wide open, ears wide open, being present was my assignment. And I was very curious. I gave myself permission to be curious. And a big question for me was, will I be accepted here? And will I feel like I belong here?
Yeah.
Because I would admit that I had a deep down longing, yearning to be able to call myself Bulgarian, but I've never even studied in a Bulgarian school.
Same.
I've never written, however it is that I could possibly write in Bulgarian. God knows my mom made some efforts as a little girl, but I think they're relatively limited. And so I was just curious, would I be seen as, quote unquote, the American? And, let's call the elephant in the room. I think there's a lot of assumptions that many Bulgarians might still carry to this day.
Yes, of course.
And so
We're still a little bit, we're still different.
so I was thinking, would I go back to Bulgaria, and then people would think, oh, who does she think she is? Why why is she even here?
Mm.
Or she probably like thinks she's like a big deal because she lived in America, and like, or would they call me the American?
Yeah.
And I just so it was a test, prototyping, kind of a short period.
Yeah. And I think it's so great that you like gave yourself that permission, I guess.
Yeah. It was
wholeheartedly
permission
to just discover and see what happens, right?
Exactly.
I think this is something that many people in America even wants to do, but haven't yet taken that leap to go into the unknown, basically, like after not being here for so long.
Yeah, it
not
was
growing up here,
definitely a leap, and it was definitely helpful to have a defined frame. So I knew while I was here what I was doing. Even in the residency, we had an apartment where we lived as residents, an apartment we used as a studio space. And even though I have a home in Bulgaria, I actually lived for the first month with the residents. So for all intents and purposes, I felt like, a foreigner in Bulgaria, which was a very safe transition for me to be able to be among foreigners and be the translator and nothing else.
Yeah.
Simply like not know just as much as they don't know.
Yeah.
And yet have a little bit of an insight different than they did,
Yeah.
So what happened was, it was a test. Will I be accepted? Will I feel like I belong? And the outcome was, I actually discovered that, contrary to what we might presume, I had a lot more Bulgarian in me, from the nuances of adapting to different profiles of people and how to communicate with them, to the nuances of how you move and live in the city versus the countryside or village, to the kind of dialogue between foreigners in Bulgaria and Bulgarians who've been abroad but are back, to kind of, so I actually found I was more Bulgarian than I expected. And I was so pleasantly surprised to find a lot of my assumptions. I was kind of, I had braced myself for a lot of negativity, quite frankly.
Yeah, same actually. This is something that I think we hear living abroad, that like Bulgarians are so negative and like you need to not give into that and keep your positivity, which I admit there are some.
It exists,
It exists, yes, but it's not something to be afraid of or to to be.
I also think
defensive.
It's not. I don't think it's defining. I think that we have to remember the proportions we're dealing with. So Bulgaria is a smaller country. So just like anywhere in the world, whether you're in Germany or the UK or the US, which is much bigger significantly, you have different groups of people with different experience, different lifestyles.
Yeah.
And it's just the same in Bulgaria. It's just we're a smaller country, so you come across the differences much more readily.
Yeah, it's more concentrated.
Yeah. So
saturated.
Yeah. So I was braced for a lot of negativity. And I was braced for criticism. And I was really pleasantly surprised to find a lot of people who, one, were like-minded, of different ages.
Yeah.
Yes, young, who had maybe similarly been abroad and come back, or who had, participated in Erasmus programs, or who had lived abroad for a number of years and chosen to come back. But also people who were well-established, mature families, who had even established businesses, had lived here, had the opportunity to move away and had chosen to be here, or had established companies elsewhere and had closed them, come back and started from zero.
Yeah.
So I find that there was just enough to balance out. And at the end of the day, I think a really big thing that I was faced with is you really do get what you put out.
Yeah.
And it's not just a positive thinking principle. If we walk into our typical institutions that so many people love to criticize critiques come from reality oftentimes, right? But you walk into a place where, for whatever reason, someone across the way might not be positively predisposed, and you bring a smile and you bring an opportunity rather than kind of a smack in the face.
Yeah.
You will get a very different result. And I've watched it time and again.
Yeah. It also just depends on you. I feel like this is a theme that we've been discovering more and more in the podcast since we started. Like it starts from your attitude, from your
Totally.
mindsets,
Absolutely.
and what you put out there. Even if you don't get it back, like you'll still end up with a better experience, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I guess to summarize that, it was not a clear process. It was not on my horizon. I came in 2018 for the artist residency with a specific frame, and just to be present, it opened my eyes to some possibilities.
Yeah.
And 2019, I decided, having gone back after that 2018, I actually had some private commissions for some paintings, and the firm I had left was asking me to come back. But, so I worked with them in pieces while I was in the States. But at that point, it was like a spark had been lit.
Yeah.
And that there was a big question now of, I wonder if this next step that I was so unclear about might actually be possible to be here in Bulgaria.
Yeah.
And it was not a linear decision, and it was not an immediate decision. So it was very logical and very tested and very thought out over the course of 3 years about. So 2019, I came back for a period of 5 months, I think it was, with the intention then to dive deeper into the question of, is it possible for me to actually be here for a longer period of time?
Okay.
And I had then begun dreaming about, we have a family home in Northwest Bulgaria, which had largely been left to the management of my aunt and my grandmother. So at that point, I had for many years asked the question, could this be more than just this family home or a farmstead where it's in some ways a burden, because on the one hand, it was built by my great-grandparents, and we have this family tie to the land, to the history of the place, and a sense of honor and wanting to respect both what had come before and what is now. And yet it felt like a very binary decision. It felt like either we needed to, move there and become, agricultural farmers.
Live in the village.
Yeah.
В селото.
Yep. Да станем, да живеем на село.
Yeah, to live in the village, yeah.
Or we sell, and it just felt like it was one or the other. And it almost didn't make sense in light of everything that had come before, either in my family or in my own life. And yet I didn't feel like selling was right. And so I just started asking this question, is something else possible? And then 2019, when I came back, I was kind of excavating what else is happening here. So that was my yes year.
Okay.
Anything and anyone who invited me anywhere, I went, and anything that was
yes to
happening,
everything.
I went. Just wanted to see what was happening in Bulgaria.
Yeah.
And
so that probably led to a lot of discoveries.
Yeah, I had some amazing, I went to a festival in the mountains. I experienced the Black Sea for the first time, honestly. I had gone, one other time before with my father for a very short 2-day stint, but I never had that experience of going to the sea, that summer sea. And I went camping. I found a church. So I started to connect more
with the community.
Yeah, with community. And I went to the home. I called some engineers. I checked out, does it make sense even feasibly to invest any energy into the property and the structure?
You did your research?
I did some research, yeah. So it was really a year of research. And then I went back. And then I began to dream about offering that space as a residency.
Okay.
I started working. So a big question is working with what is really present. And what was present for me was this kind of nostalgic and deep down connection to Bulgaria
Yeah.
and this longstanding reality and relationship to the US. So if like these things were present in my hands or in my life, I said, okay, what these are the resources I have. What can I make with these resources? What can I do with these resources?
Mhm.
And so I started kind of brainstorming, could this property actually become a residency? Could I connect to communities? Could I? So I started dreaming about bringing people from the US and artists from Bulgaria to work side by side in
Wow,
this
that's
property.
amazing.
Because I think that one of the strongest ways that you can impact change, you can affect change, is through one-on-one relationship and one-on-one mentorship.
Yeah.
And so I imagined holding a frame for that to happen and inviting people to ask questions of one another, to work and develop process alongside each other. Ask, oh, what is it like in the US doing? What is your studio like here? Do you have a studio? You don't have a studio. Who do you work with? Who funds your work? Where do you exhibit? And involving the community by way of having them, prepare food, teaching us some local craft, showing them. A lot of people consider the Northwest as some of the least economic or financially
Economically developed parts.
Exactly. But actually, it's preserved in many ways. A lot of resources there. So that was my year of research and kind of imagining, okay, could this
building
really,
this dream?
Yeah, could
could
this be more than a dream?
Mhm.
Is there a need for it, not just in my own head, but on all sides, on the local community side, on the Bulgarian arts community side, on the US foreign art
It involves
side.
a lot of actors to participate.
Yeah. So is there a need? And then is there, what resources would it take? And would there be, what might the potential outcomes and change be? And then this is, if we think about community, it's a long-term building trust process. So really I started from 2018. I just showed up a couple times, but then 2019, again, just showing up, having a lot of the community remembered me from being the little girl. And they were super suspicious and curious, like, oh, what is she doing here? Now is she going to disappear next year? And I inevitably don't spend a huge amount of time every year, but I do go regularly. And when I go, they see me work hard. They see me really pour into the place with what I can. Yeah. Not what I can't, but what I can. And so at the end of that time in Bulgaria, I actually went back, and the two people who I guess are connected to my story and could know both the story here and the story there are my mother and my father. Although they're separated and they're divorced for many years, and my mom officially owns the property, I actually shared the idea with them, and we did some more research in the US, looking at artist communities and what the residency model looks like.
Wow.
And there's a lot of details in here, but the bottom line was that my two parents, who had been divorced for a number of years and saw many things in different ways over the course of different decisions, actually came under the same, aligned in the same way to say, oh, actually, we think it's crazy, but knowing you, knowing the place, seeing all, they said, oh, it won't work for this reason and this reason and this reason and this reason. But in the end,
it could.
They said, we kind of get it, actually.
That's amazing. That's
it was
so great.
It was amazing. I had never imagined that could happen. But it was amazing, actually.
Yeah.
I think they themselves were, in a way, kind of saying it and like, are we really saying this to her right now? Like, do we both really think that, it was separate? And yet, so they came into the agreement of basically saying, well, I think, give it a try, but we get it. We get why you're looking in this direction. We can see how maybe it could work.
Yeah.
And sure, give it a try, which was enough for me. So I actually came back December 30th of 2019.
Wow. Okay.
I was here until early March, and as COVID set in, the idea of establishing an international artist residency got a little complicated.
Oh, wow. Yes. This part of life came along.
Yeah. So I guess the long story short, I went back to the US for a few months and felt I really needed to come back and continue the route I had begun.
Okay.
So mid-COVID came back in June, I believe it was,
Mhm.
and spent that year, 2020 through the fall of 2021, actually. I was here for that full year.
Yeah.
Pursuing. So if the first year was seeing what's present, the second year seeing what's possible, the third year was kind of trying it out, like starting to walk in a direction.
Maybe like committing to the idea. And
It was the starting point. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it was at the end of that when I went back and I said, okay, I think I need to continue giving this a try.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
It's a very like just inspiring story of I feel like many Bulgarians abroad have this like connection to Bulgaria, that they want to come back and they want to give something back to the country from what they know, from what they've learned abroad. And I feel like from what I'm hearing so far, you were actually able to cultivate that, to actually put that into action, which I feel like is just an amazing thing to be able to do, and actually contribute to maybe even the development of artists here in Bulgaria and in like States and whatever else, like to be able to collaborate. Yeah.
I hope so. I would, to be honest, it's a longing of mine, a deep need and a longing that I would be living for something that leaves a legacy.
Yeah.
And for me, my faith is at the core of that what we do is eternal. It's not just here and now what we're going to build, but really wanting to be a part of something that builds for something that lasts.
Yeah, beyond you.
Yeah, beyond me.
Mhm.
So it's really a deep honor. I can't say that, I have to say that I think I work harder now than I've ever worked.
Yeah.
And I've taken a lot of risks essentially here.
Yeah.
And I think that for different people in different positions, it definitely would look different,
Mm-hmm.
but it is doable. In many ways, I'm still figuring it out as I now am starting to sift through maybe some things to cut out and some things to focus deeper on.
Yeah.
But what has kept my work here and made it possible has been exactly finding the connections with others that are like-minded.
Yeah, finding your community.
And building together in order to have that impact.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I also wanted to go into the other organization. I don't know if they're connected, Kollektivet.
Yeah, so
because I also like at least directly see the impact that it has, not just in Sofia, but in Ruse.
Yes.
And I think
Gabrovo.
Yes.
Yeah.
I feel like it has also started many things that have actually changed the cities and impacted people.
Totally.
Could we maybe go into how that started? If you were, what your role is in maybe that organization, what you've seen happen, and the impact it's had on you and whoever else in Bulgaria.
So I met with the founder of Kollektivet, the collective, Martin Yankov, in September of 2020. We were using the same co-working space and I was preparing. So I had come back in the middle of COVID around June or so, and I was preparing for an opening in September, an art opening at a gallery connected to this co-working space. Meanwhile, he was preparing his first edition of a newly founded foundation called The Collective, and the first edition of a festival, the Rivers of the City, at the time, the Rivers of Sofia Festival. So as I prepared my opening, we met and just, shared a common workspace in some capacity. And as I learned about this event, He said, great. If you need any help, I'm happy to get involved. He, somewhat like me, had also lived abroad
Okay.
for a number of years. He'd lived in the UK. He had studied landscape architecture there, had a landscape architecture firm and a construction company there,
Yeah. Okay.
and had decided to come back just a year earlier or so, and decided to form the foundational collective.
Okay. Cool.
And so with this first initiative, the purpose and goal of that initiative was to highlight the rivers in Sofia, which many people know to be canals, don't even realize
Yeah.
they're rivers, or that there are more than one, or that there are more than three, in which there are many more than three. And the purpose was to highlight that there are rivers, that they have riversides that have incredible potential to be connectors to the city, to be green line spaces, to be bike paths, to really bridge the city and bring more park, like linear park
Yeah.
presence.
And urban development.
Completely.
Bring community to the rivers.
Exactly, into the city. So that has a direct impact on the way that we live in a city, the way we experience a city. So right now, one of the number one issue with it is the water is polluted. But another issue is that we're completely separated from, there's no access to the canals, because the canals are a stoned-in canal.
Mhm.
Waterways, and so there's no stairs, there's not early warning system. Water levels can rise very high when there are high rains. So this is a much larger kind of city planning and urban structure process in question.
Yeah.
So the collective exists in order to bring together a variety of stakeholders around common goal of bringing new life to underutilized public spaces.
Yeah.
We do it by way of short-term events that spotlight the potential of the space and prototype what it could be over the long term. The
Wow.
purpose is to bring long-term change and to transform the community and the city in the long haul through the short-term intervention. So the Rivers of Sofia, in its first edition, 2020, was planned for 3 locations. And at that point, I jumped in with creating a space for dialogue and for feedback from citizens and from visitors to the event, what they think about the river, what they imagine along the river. And this was very important to us to see as a result of having access there. So what Martin had planned was to bring a festival along the river by providing access, giving stairs that would bring people to actually walk down the canal beds, having a stage down there and some cultural programming, having some exhibitions and makers and local businesses being exhibiting. And it really, within some of the other locations, we had comedy, we had a children's kind of like children's theater, outdoor movie. So from the first year in Sofia, that led to an opportunity in the Ruse, where we turned the model to working with high school students. And so then I joined the team and facilitating the workshops for a group of high school students to come up with a design for a local space along the Danube River. And we then later together built a space that was a space you could have access closer to the river. You could watch the sunset. You could have a drink. You could sit in the shade. You could hang out space made with people, for people. And then last year we added Gabrovo to the presence of cities, and we're hoping that Vidin will be very close behind.
This is so exciting that I kind of see like Colectivo like as a organization of visionaries, that they see the potential in spaces and they develop it and kind of show like a sneak peek of what it can be.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's a very accurate description. Yeah. And there are certainly no lack of spaces like that in Bulgaria.
There's so
where
many...
you could imagine the potential of a given space.
I feel like Bulgaria has so many abandoned amazing places. and that are just untouched. And I feel like Collectiva is like going
Yeah.
in to discover them, to reveal them to people. But there's just so much more to do, you know?
There's definitely so much more. There's plenty to do for everyone. And, you know, my
Yes.
hope would just be that as we get mutually inspired and more people become proactive in transforming, that we would, you know, from a design standpoint, I hope that we will always be mindful of where we were
Mhm.
and where we currently are in
Mhm.
terms of context,
Yeah.
people, architecture, visual aesthetic, but also the specific needs and resources of a given space when envisioning the new thing to be. You know, one of my pain points is that there are some places that do, you know, there are interventions that do bring in new opportunities,
Mhm.
and it's by way of just completely destroying the old. And so there are times when there are things that do need to be destroyed,
Yeah.
but I think it's a fine line. What is the way that we don't just erase, but that we really do build
Mm.
and reiterate and kind of give on new life to something.
Yeah.
We're currently, you know, dreaming about what is the potential of the Black Sea, you know, and tourism along the Black Sea, and we have no shortage of natural resources in Bulgaria. And so
Absolutely,
as
yeah.
we think about all the opportunity that there is, it's also a high stake responsibility.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think it's also just an not so discovered sphere yet in Bulgaria. It's a niche that if somebody is interested could just be so creative and
Yes.
be able to really see their impact, really
Yes, it is.
create something
Mhm.
real.
Sure.
So yeah, I also wanted to go into like, since you've been here for quite a while now, yes, you go back and forth sometimes, but what is something that you wish, or like a few things that you wish people abroad, Bulgarians abroad, knew about life in Bulgaria? Maybe some challenges, maybe some opportunities that you didn't expect. What are those things?
You know, I hate to sound like a broken record, but I just so believe this to my core. And that's that it's not as hard as you think, as you
Yeah.
might think. At least that's, you know, it's very much what I think. And my experience has been that I think the biggest wall to overcome and the biggest risk to take is the risk on yourself.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of people blame it. They put it on corruption, they put it on stuff isn't organized. It's not going to work out. But really, like you said, the wall is.
Yeah. I really think it's the inner wall, and also in the psychological. So, you know, let's not ignore that there is a communal trauma that, even having grown up abroad, you know, I carry it second generation by way of ways that I was raised in my own family, things that are sometimes even unrealized, you know, subconscious, sorry,
Yeah. Yeah.
subconscious. And so that trauma is very real, and it affects us in ways that we're not always, you know, intentional about addressing, maybe. And so I would say maybe I would really encourage people to dig deep about what are your reasons to be abroad and what are your real reasons to keep you away from being here,
Yeah.
and really kind of having an honest confrontation with the self.
Yeah.
I really believe that that's key, and taking a risk on yourself. I believe that Bulgaria is a place where everything is possible.
Absolutely.
I really do think that, in spite of corruption, in spite of whatever else you want to say.
Yeah.
I think it's possible. I don't think it's a cliche of, if you really, you know, want to achieve something, that you can. I think it's just about finding the right solution to any given problem, finding the right approach.
And to be honest, there are plenty of problems that have the need of solutions, obviously, but they're just waiting.
Yeah.
There's so many opportunities.
Yeah.
That just can be taken.
Yeah. And my other, I think, invitation would be to give yourself the permission to be present for some period of time.
Yeah.
I found it very healthy, the opportunity that I had, which was a very defined frame of given time for a given purpose in a given place.
Yeah.
Without the obligation to commit. I didn't need to be thinking about, am I going to now live here for the rest of my life?
Yeah.
So, and this is a person speaking who did not have the opportunity to come back every summer and spend it in the village or in the country or on the Black Sea.
Yeah.
I didn't have friends. I certainly do have relatives here, but limited groups of relatives, So I think that, it's the internal wall and taking a risk and giving yourself a defined space to give it a try.
And see if you like it.
Yeah. But be fair, being fair to yourself. And I think there are plenty of organizations that are making it easier now. And there's so much that you could even do ahead of time. And I'm just finding that more and more those people doing an active in Bulgaria are very much open to collaborating and interested in building new things together.
Yeah.
And so, you could even, your stakes don't have to be as high. There's so many opportunities. You could do some sort of, joint venture with an existing organization or company. You could.
And this is the hope that we have with this podcast, of course, to just reveal and share stories and show that it doesn't have to be such a scary thing,
Absolutely.
And hopefully eventually we develop that into the community that we want from Završtany back to Bulgaria. People that have come back like you and like us to have a community here and maybe even help others come back.
Yeah.
So looking at your life here and your achievements, it's obvious that being in Bulgaria has had quite an impact on your direction in life, on everything. And what is something that, or like within the next 5 years, let's say, what is something you hope to see happen or change, maybe in your life, maybe in Bulgaria, and the organizations that you're a part of?
Well, for my own life, in the next 5 years, I would love to start a family. And I remember years ago being asked this question about Bulgaria while being in the US. And I said, oh no, I can't imagine having a family in Bulgaria. And now I can't imagine not having a family in Bulgaria. So I would say that. And to anyone who says, well, they're not going to have the same opportunities there that you could give them in the US or in any other country in Europe, let's say. I would say that I would love to take on the challenge of making those opportunities for them here. I think there's just so much room for creating new opportunities.
Absolutely.
Yes, it's the harder route. I get that.
Absolutely, yes.
I'm not arguing there. And I am tired because my excitement with the collective 3 years ago is just as big, if not bigger, but I'm tired. But at least I know why I'm doing it.
You have your purpose there.
And that matters to me more. So in the scope of the community and in Bulgaria, I would love to see more collaboration and more joint ventures. So in community and in economics.
Yeah.
Right. So I would love to see more of Bulgarian theory and academia being thought leaders abroad, because they can be.
Absolutely.
But sometimes those that are here don't feel affirmed that they have something worthwhile to say.
Yeah, maybe feel invalidated.
Yes.
Compared to looking at the West.
And yet I
media.
think that there's plenty of that. There's an incredible wisdom and incredible resources here.
Yeah.
So I'm seeing it happening just in the trajectory of 5 years. I would love to see it more become the norm of an exchange and an equal status exchange and enrichment.
Yeah.
So I would also love to see more, not only foreign investment in Bulgaria, but joint companies that are both Bulgarian owned, working abroad and working here.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of potential in that. I would love to see key locations in Bulgaria being responsibly redesigned in order to draw higher numbers of tourists that are able to highlight history into the future, right? So what was, but what is, and something new, right?
I love that phrase, history into the future.
Yeah. So I am the first to admit that I have a lot to grow in learning our deep Bulgarian history and the rich layers of it.
Yeah, I agree. I am the same.
So I do value it and absolutely don't want to try to erase it. But I think something that I come face to face with a lot is history in the past. And I guess I want to see more history for the future, remembering where we came from so that can drive us into action moving forward.
And also give us confidence moving forward.
Yes.
Yeah.
So a lot of times it just feels like it's stuck, like what was, and then now it's broken. And there's just this break and that's it. And we're just going to sit and wallow and cry and whine and stomp our feet. And I'm kind of tired of it. So, but to that end, I think there are more and more organizations that I see all around me who are doing, in Ruse, I've come across organizations again with others who have lived abroad, have made the very conscious decision to come back.
Yeah.
And all over,
Yeah. I think Ruse is a very prime example of a city that is reviving. Yeah.
I'm sure Rusa
so
would love to hear that. I agree with you.
So I just really want to thank you for being on the podcast with this. I feel like there are so many topics that we haven't even touched that we could discuss.
Yeah.
So hopefully maybe in the future we can do this again and really be able to dive even deeper. But now that we're approaching the end of our podcast, we have one more thing that we do at the end, and it is a bowl of questions that I would love for you to pick a question from.
What will I pick?
You can go ahead and read it out loud and let us know what you think.
What is your favorite city in Bulgaria and why?
Wow, so fitting.
Yikes. It's not fair. I don't know too many cities in Bulgaria. I know a lot, but favorite.
A little bit of a controversial topic.
My favorite city in Bulgaria is the one where I am building a new community. So whether it's in Sofia or in Ruse or in Bregovo, it's not the place, but it's the action of building. And I think I'll be honest to admit that I'm now at the crossroads of deep rather than wide. So I've spent the past 3 years really learning, getting to know more and more what's present here. And I've invested in the collective and in some foundations relating to Poema Collective, which is the intention of the residency in the Northwest.
Yeah.
But I'm now looking at where will it be where I can really go deeper to build that community. So that's the why. The why, the where is the place where I'm going to go deep, and the why is because in going deep, we're able to build community that will be sustainable and that will be replicable, and that can then impact further growth.
Amazing.
Roundabout answer.
Amazing. Well, I want to thank you one more time for being on the podcast with us. And I really think our audience has learned a lot from this conversation, which I just really hope inspires them just as much as it inspires me.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, it's been an honor. And I just want to shout out to our audience. If you enjoyed listening today, and make sure, hold on. Sorry. If you enjoyed listening to our podcast today, make sure you go ahead and subscribe and follow on whatever platform that you are listening to us on. And please share this podcast with other people that you believe would be also inspired and want to just have this idea of wanting to come back to Bulgaria and start a community or start anything here. If you know somebody that would be interested in contributing to our podcast, who has either come back from abroad to Bulgaria or has been staying here and has really built something great here, please make sure to let us know in the comments. Everything that Antonia has been talking about, her residency, the collective, everything will be linked in the show notes, so make sure to take a look at those, and we will see you guys next time. Please be sure to go out and do something awesome today. Bye.